Taxpayers last year spent a record £1.7 million on fixing Brits botched by cosmetic surgery carried out abroad, with one case costing the NHS £100,000. That was to fix a dodgy tummy tuck. Cheap flights, package deals, a surplus of surgeries have all made Turkey one of the top destinations for Brits desperate for the body of their dreams. But at what cost? British cosmetic surgeons are now accusing their Turkish counterparts of using the NHS as a taxpayer-funded safety net for their poor aftercare. So who should be picking up the bill for these surgeries? Let's talk to two people who have undergone surgeries in Turkey, but who had very different experiences. I'm joined by Sara Platt, who underwent weight loss surgery that unfortunately went very wrong indeed. Also joined by Denzel Seegers, who flew from the US to undergo leg lengthening surgery, also joining us. Thank you both very much. And live from Istanbul, the Turkish cosmetic surgeon, Dr. Ercim Güven. And joining me in the studio to react to all this, talkTV contributor Esther Kraku. Now, Sara, I will come to you first, because this story is about surgeries that have gone wrong, essentially, and coming back to the UK with those. Just tell us what happened to you.
So I had weight loss surgery, and that went totally fine, and I lost 12 stone. I needed it I needed it for health reasons. I needed an emergency operation, and I couldn't have it because I was overweight during COVID. So after I'd lost all my weight, because I lost it so quickly, I was left with a saggy, hanging, really bad skin. And it was blistering, it was rubbing, it was burning, I couldn't deal with it anymore, and I couldn't afford the price in the UK. So I researched like for 17 months, and I flew out to Turkey, and basically he left me in a complete and utter mess. He operated on me when I was awake, and they held me down. And I've got complex PTSD from that. I've been left with gaping holes in my stomach. They've had to remove my boobs. I've been left with cuts across my back that wasn't even supposed to happen anyway. I can't lift my arms above my head because he's taken too much skin off. He's taken too much skin off my stomach, so there's no way of closing my stomach. And he's just totally destroyed me.
Sara, I'm so sorry to hear about that experience. Absolutely traumatic. Thank you for sharing the details with us as part of this story. I just want to ask you what advice you would give to anyone else who is considering a procedure in Turkey, because your first one was successful.
It was successful, but there was no aftercare. There was zero aftercare. And then I was recommended, obviously, to like the price difference was half the price in Turkey. It was still £15,000, but it was half the price of the UK. What I would say was, don't do it. Like it's literally like Russian roulette. You don't know what's going to happen. There's no regulations over there. There's nothing, and they don't care. Once they've got your money, they do not care. They don't.
Sara, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. I want to go to Dr. Ercim Güven now, who joins us from Turkey, a cosmetic surgeon. Listening to that story, sir, we're not saying that that is representative of all surgery in Turkey. Of course we're not. But listening to that story, what does it make you think?
Just the people think that in Turkey, the cosmetic surgery is very low cost, and they just think about the cost about the surgery. The people should think about the result firstly, and the experienced surgeons, they should find very experienced surgeons in Turkey. Many young surgeons do very low-cost operation here in Turkey, but the operations result mostly is very successful in Turkey. But the cost is very different from hospital to hospital. If you find a high-class hospital, you cannot find like this kind of hospital even in UK. This is very high-class hospital we have in Turkey. But you should pay more than like the low-cost companies in Turkey. The tourism agency make some health organization in Turkey. But if you find some tourism agency in Turkey, you are going to have very low-cost surgeries here. If you directly reach to the surgeons and connect with them, they are going to do the best things for you.
Sara, your experience was an expensive one though, right?
Yeah, it's sorry, but what you're saying is totally rubbish. I've got to be honest, because I researched for 17 months. I flew out last year and visited 8 different surgeons. Literally, the one I picked was the most expensive. He had amazing clinic, amazing reviews, and it still did not go to plan. So it was not cheap. It literally. So it's got nothing to do with that. I seen all the hospitals. I went to see all the clinics. Everything.
And of course, we'd like to restate that the doctor joining us on the show today is not the doctor that worked with Sara, but also you're just responding to the comments made there. Thank you, Sara. Let's cross now to Dinzel as well, who actually had a very different experience. Dinzel, you had leg lengthening surgery in Turkey. Talk us through what that was like.
So my experience with limb lengthening surgery was actually amazing for me. I originally was going to get it in America, but they have a rehabilitation center and they were much more costly. So after doing a bit more research about 2 weeks before my appointment in America, I actually found a few centers in Turkey that did the process. Well, one that I stumbled upon that I did the most research into, I actually found had a rehabilitation center and had like a ton of successful surgeries. So I flew out like right after doing my research and finding out about them. I flew out and I did my surgery there, and I actually did the surgery twice to get tall. I did my upper legs and lower legs. And I've had a very successful experience with it just in my recovery while I was there. It was actually my first surgery I've ever had, and it was very successful for me. I couldn't be happier with the results.
But when you hear Sara's story, obviously a very, very different experience, would that make you think twice about pursuing more surgery in Turkey or advising other people to do so?
So I don't plan on getting any other surgeries. Height was my only issue that I had with myself, really. But the center that I went through, I would to anyone. I've actually made a whole page and I promote them on my social media just because of my experience with them. I haven't seen any unsuccessful surgeries. I've only heard of one, but I couldn't tell you much about their story. It was just some random person that messaged me online. But it is definitely not for everyone. It was the most painful process I've ever been through. But it was, like I said, worth it for me overall because height was something that really stuck with me.
Thank you very much, Dinzel, for sharing your story with us. I want to come to the studio now and speak to Esther, who has been watching all of this with me, these stories. You know, and Sara and Dinzel are still with us and obviously have had very different experiences. Yeah. Sara is particularly traumatic. When it comes to people making the personal choice to go have cosmetic surgery, and I want to disclose I have had cosmetic surgery. I had a nose job in Dubai a few years ago. I was living there. I didn't fly there for it. Okay. There you go. That was my recovery. Very painful. I went for a medical procedure and they took off the bump on my nose while I was in there. No regrets at all. I think anyone should pursue cosmetic surgery responsibly if they want to. It can be absolutely life-changing, Esther. But in terms of flying somewhere to go do it, what are your thoughts on that?
I think if you understand the risks and you are prepared for what comes with it, I think that's fine. I think in the context of the NHS, because we're talking about it in the context of, you know, the NHS having to foot the bill for botched surgeries, I think that's a reality that comes with socialized healthcare. I mean, if we really wanted to get to the crux of the issue, we should be talking about obesity and alcoholism, because these are choices that, you know, people make. Well, in the case of obesity, you can argue that it's linked to mental health, but at the end of the day, you know, getting to that state is because of personal choices, and yet the NHS spends most of its budget on, you know, rectifying lifestyle-related illnesses like this. I think £1.7 million for botched surgery is actually a steal. If we could exchange that for all the, you know, costs that we spend on, or the amount of money that's spent on, you know, lifestyle-related illnesses, I think that the NHS would be in a much better state. But the reality is, at the end of the day, people have to take personal responsibility for the choices that they make. You know, you could go to a country where you don't have any social support, you don't have any, you know, relatives around, you know, aftercarers may or may not exist, and that's a risk that you take by going abroad to get surgery. So these are all the things that people need to consider.
Absolutely. And do you think, by the way, that there should be any advisory from the government or from health bodies or from plastic surgery associations about Turkey, based on what we're hearing?
I don't think necessarily, because yes, we usually use the example of Turkey because it's so popular and common. But, you know, increasingly people are going to India for sort of eye surgery, the Middle East, Dubai, I've heard of as well. So I think Turkey, just because of, you know, it's what we know, but there are other places as well that people go to. At the end of the day, I think we've become so infantilized as a society that I don't think it's necessary for the government to say, this is your responsibility. But I do think if we're concerned about the repercussions with regards to the costs on the NHS, we really should be talking about obesity and alcoholism as opposed to, you know, botched surgeries.
Dr. Guven, I want to end this discussion coming back to you because, again, you're not representative of all cosmetic surgeons. You weren't related to the botched surgery we were talking about earlier on in the show, but want to ask for your advice to anyone considering flying not just to Turkey, but to somewhere else in the world for cosmetic surgery. How should that be done responsibly?
I just want to recommend to the people, UK people, just first time they should make interview with the surgeons, real interview, live, because they need to see the environment and the hospitals of the surgery going to do. So it is very important to talk with the surgeons. It's not fine to share the photographs and have some surgeries about the photographs. You need to talk with the surgeons and interview with the surgeons, consultation, and later decide about the surgery in Turkey. It is very important, and the first thing that we advise for the UK people. If you come to Turkey and see the hospitals, if you look around the hospitals and the environment, the sterilization, and especially the physicians' experiment is very important for the successful surgery result. It is very important.
Do you think your cosmetic surgery industry is a positive part of Turkey's reputation?
Yes, because in Turkey, there is many physicians that's well educated in plastic surgery. So you can find very, very high-end surgery procedures in Turkey. And many surgeons have a very good reputation in Turkey. If you can find good surgeons, you can have good result as well.
Of course, but there are always, of course, examples of stories like we had from Sara this evening as well. I want to thank particularly our two case studies who've shared their stories with us, Sara Platt and Denzel Seegers. Dr. Guven, for your insight. Esther here in the studio. Thanks.